Hello, and welcome to this fast interview where we're trying to shed some light on how the film industry will look like when this COVID-19 pandemic is over. Today, we're going to have with us Paul Miller. He was the head of film financing of the Doha Film Institute for 2 years. He is a film producer, worked extensively around the globe, especially in the United States, Europe, and the Middle East. Hello, Paul.
Hi, Felipe. How are you?
Welcome. I'd like to start asking you, the film industry has been an area of activity that's been in constant shift throughout its history. And a shock like of this magnitude will without a doubt make a major change. How do you think it will look like in the end? And do you believe these changes will be for better in the long haul?
Well, I mean, those are some big questions, and I guess I would start off by quoting William Goldman, who said, nobody knows anything or nobody knows nothing in the film business. But I do think, if I was to sort of guess, is that the industry was in the process of going through a massive change with the, online and streaming, etc. And I think that the pandemic will have just accelerated that change. I don't know where that was going to go in the first place, but I think wherever it's going will happen much quicker. I mean, there was a couple releases this, I guess, month by Universal. What was it, Invisible Man and one other one, where they just went ahead and released it, via their variety of streamers. So you can imagine that model being interesting to them. But in terms of distribution, basically missing out the exhibitor is something that they've just tried out, and where that leads long term, I'm not sure. I mean, there's all sorts of scenarios you could imagine where they use a theatrical release for almost for promotion, or a little bit sort of what Netflix did with Roma and Marriage Story, where they had a limited release. And I saw recently that STX just merged with I think they were called Eros International, an big Indian company. They have their huge library and they have a huge streaming service themselves. There's an increased vertical integration going on, which isn't supposed to be happening, but sort of is.
You're talking about the streaming industry, and already it's been about a month, 2 months that this pandemic is really hitting the Western world. And we already see quite a few cinemas going into administration. Or in the future, there have been talks that when cinemas open, it'll be about one third of the capacity. Streaming will be the most important source of revenue for new films. But this consolidation can be quite scary. Don't you agree?
Yeah, I mean, there was in 1948, there was a Supreme Court in the U.S. ruled against vertical integration, where the studios, the producers, were also the exhibitors. And Netflix has sort of gone around that a little bit, with the help of other Supreme Court rulings and the Trump administration, to become vertically integrated systems. How that pans out and where the theaters fit in that, I'm not really sure. It'll be interesting to see. And of course, yes, some individual theaters may go broke, but that doesn't mean that when the pandemic's over, other ones won't open up again. I still think when the pandemic's over, one of the first things people want to do is get out of the house. I don't think that'll change.
Do you think the TV will have an important role coming out of this?
I don't know. I think television as we used to know it growing up, I don't see a great future in that. Funny enough, we're in the process of moving house and we just decided not to get television subscription, and I'm old. And most young people I know have never had a TV and don't watch television. They watch lots of things, but it's not what we know as broadcast television. And that, of course, for Europe anyway, is a big question for financing, because public television supports a lot of independent cinema. That's not the case in the US at all. I suppose state government broadcasts may continue for some time, but I think in the long run, I would be surprised if it is left in the format that it's in now.
Do you think that now we'll see a lot of more series and even more series and miniseries instead of the 90, 120 minute feature film?
I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, I think, people have always talked about a peak point in which there's just so many series made that it's just not possible for anybody to watch them all. I've heard people say that, great as Netflix has been and can be, at a certain point, like, okay, I want to watch something different to what Netflix offers. And of course, there are other streamers like Mubi, et cetera, and many others. I think that, that curatorial process that streamers have still has a ways to go. Series are great, but it's a different artistic beast. And I know personally that I want to watch a movie. I don't want to have to watch something for 9 hours. I like the beginning, middle, and end of a 90-minute film. It's going back to this kind of common thing to say, but good content's good content. Sometimes you want to read a novel, sometimes you want to read nonfiction, sometimes you want to read a great poem. And I think that film is different to drama series. Whether there's more or less of one or the other, I don't know. It's the new thing is drama series, and maybe that'll evolve into a third narrative storytelling that we haven't yet found out. A bit like at the moment, I think VR and augmented reality is still a novelty. It hasn't really found its feet in terms of storytelling. Maybe somebody will crack it one day, but at the moment that hasn't happened.
Now, thinking about the future, we're very likely going to live with this virus for quite a while, at least 12 months. Probably there will be productions that will go into shooting while the virus is still out there. What do you think a film set will look like during this period?
Well, I don't know. I spoke with a friend who's a professor at a film school, and he said their end-of-year draws were just actors against a screen. And yet he said, there was great creativity in that. I don't think the virus causes any stop on creativity. I don't think that's the issue, but it's the monetizing of that, finding an audience and making money out of it. So that the business side of it is the tricky bit.
Yeah. However, this still poses quite a few risks for any production for any film that goes into shooting. One actor gets sick, or some part of the crew gets sick and enters quarantine. This makes shooting a film even riskier, or do you think there'll be some contingency plans to solve this?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It is riskier. I suppose, of course, insurance companies aren't going to cover it. I suppose the testing thing, as I understand it, the testing is you can get testing. And so I guess you would test negative, and then you would have to just keep testing the crew and making sure you'd sort of almost have to have the crew go out to the middle of the desert and make a Western where there is no outside people coming in. You sort of self-isolate the whole crew.
For example, Emirates, one of the very few flights that they still operate, that they require people to do a blood test before they enter the airplane just to prove that they're not sick.
I mean, interesting, the Emirates is one country they're still in production. They have not shut down.
Oh, really? Oh, that's interesting. Do you know of a lot of productions?
I just know Image Nation are doing one they didn't shut down.
That's interesting. And do you think there will be stronger sources of financing, for example, from state? Or do you think streaming will come up with stronger finance?
In the short term, yes. But, long term, I still, I read an interesting article in the New Yorker about the impact of the influenza virus of 1918 on the film business in the United States. Created a huge sort of paradigm shift where World War I was raging on, and then when the virus was over, of course, two things happened. One is that, of course, war movies weren't so interesting anymore. Nobody wanted to watch a war movie. And the second thing was that the producers who had been most sort of, I would say, cautious and prudent with their business model and were holding on, a lot of them, especially the smaller ones, went out of business. And it was the ones who really, the show business guys who were really out there trying to sell new stories and new things did well. And it actually led to the creation of Hollywood as we knew it. So the pandemic of 1918 created the Hollywood studio system in a way.
Consolidation is still very much in our plate in the near future.
Exactly. So there could be, even greater consolidation. Netflix, was just an acquisitions company and soon became a production company. And just the other day, I got my youngest daughter, Disney Plus, and she's like having a great time watching all the old movies she saw as a young child, which Netflix used to have Disney.
It's clear that at the end of these 12 months, only the stronger will survive in a way. But it's also complicated to leave so many people behind in our.
The short term scenario is bad, and as I've sort of said before, Europe arguably makes too many movies. I mean, it makes twice as many movies as the United States for the same population, and most movies in Europe don't get many viewers, whether it's theatrical or otherwise. So yeah, maybe a lot of people who have been doing a movie every other year, not doing so well financially, are not going to make it. And of course, the freelance people, especially as you mentioned, the crew, they're not working. How long they can go without working before they have to think of a plan B?
We know now that the film festival in Cannes is still not canceled, but parts of it have been canceled, and the Marché du Film has been moved online. How do you feel about a market that's solely done online?
I don't know. I mean, my understanding of the Marché was it was very much under pressure from the US agents. They were suggesting their own, like, let's just get together and have something online. I can imagine it's going to be useful for those people who are I would say the bigger players who already know each other. And I think for smaller, for the European whole art house world, who it's a little bit less sort of financially based. I don't know how that's going to work, but that the happenstance of Cannes, where you can meet somebody at a party or go to a booth, well, that's not happening anymore. For the less experienced filmmakers, it's going to be, or producers, it's going to be a real challenge.
How has it affected you personally? Was there any major disruption to your professional life?
Well, I mean, the main one is not being able to go to Fest, so I suppose there's that. But I was actually lucky because I have two things that are in development, so that's quite easy. I'm still hiring writers, so writers are having a great time. And I have one film that is in the middle of financing, which we don't want to shoot till January, February. So other than the travel thing, because as you know, I speak at conferences and stuff like that. I was supposed to go to Red Sea Festival. I was supposed to go to a bunch of other stuff, and that all got, canceled. So in that sense, I've been affected.
And how about your personal life?
No, I'm doing okay. I mean, like the kids, you have to sort of, it's hard to, sometimes it feels it's hard to be too structured about it. It's I would say it's sometimes hard to concentrate sometimes because you have a lot of other things to think about. I've worked at companies, but I've also worked by myself, it's for many, many years. So not so different, except of course the family are around all day and I don't go to an office.
Paul, thank you very much for doing this with us. And we'll hopefully see each other personally again soon.
I have one little fun anecdote that I read during the 1600s, during the plague. Isaac Newton was, sent home to work from home. And while he was there, he just basically discovered calculus and the laws of motion. So there's always good stuff to come out of being in isolation.
Definitely. Okay, Paul. Thank you very much.
Take care. Bye.